Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Strife Hayes and I love MMORPGs. I've played them for the majority of my life and collectively have spent tens of thousands of hours inside virtual worlds. After my extensive time gaming and living through so many online games, I've come to realise there are a few problems present in the MMORPG world. This is a series of videos discussing what's ruining the MMORPG genre. Today, why microtransactions are ruining MMORPGs. I know that many of you upon hearing this will have an immediate reaction, either agreeing or disagreeing because of one reason or another, but I'd like to take this slowly and explain both sides, along with some behind-the-scenes knowledge to fully expose how bad the situation really is. In the interest of being both fair and comprehensive, I'm going to define what I talk about when I say microtransaction. This isn't a discussion about loot boxes. That's going to be its own video. A loot box is a specific type of microtransaction. Here, I'm talking about the general process of microtransactions, the act of giving money to a company for a smaller product within a larger product, not any specific type of smaller product. A microtransaction is a small additional service sold within a game. Normally a low-cost, one-time payment that provides something new to me as a player. A microtransaction exists within another product and is not the product itself. It cannot exist without the host product. To use an example, a full video game or major expansion to that game large enough to qualify as its own game isn't a microtransaction. It's a fully realised product. However, I could pay a small amount of additional money to purchase, say, a novelty hat within that game for my character to wear. That's a microtransaction. An additional, non-essential fee I'm free to buy or not that exists within the host game. Many people believe microtransactions really began back in OBLIVION, the fourth Elder Scrolls game, which was not an MMORPG, with the sale of horse armour, a visual update to your in-game horse that made it look like it was wearing metal banded armour. The armour didn't have any in-game stats or effects, it was simply a visual override. However, despite doing nothing in-game of any value or use beyond changing the look of your horse, it was so successful that companies suddenly realised their revenue stream didn't have to stop with the sale of the game. They could continue to make customers pay for additional things within the game. And with that realisation, the mainstream microtransaction was born. So that's what microtransactions are. In-game additional purchases. The word micro may give you the impression that these are all cheap or low-cost extras, but that's not the case either, and I'll discuss that later. Some microtransactions cost several £100s. Right, now we're on the same page about what they are, I need to step away from microtransactions themselves for a moment and explain how sales works. Trust me, this will all tie together later. I've been a salesman for several years, working everywhere from retail to leisure to entertainment, and I'm going to tell you the secret to selling anything. There are only two reasons people buy things. 1. To solve a problem. Some people will phrase this as to have a need met. And 2. To experience a lifestyle. Let's explain both these tactics. We'll start with the first, to solve a problem. Everyone will experience a large amount of problems in their life they need to solve. If you're hungry, you need food. If you're cold, you need clothing. These are base needs and problems, and people will buy whatever product covers that base need. All items that exist within this realm simply exist to solve a problem or meet a need. These are the items that require the least amount of sales pressure. I do not need to convince a starving person they need food. They already know that. I do not need to bring my salesman attitude if I'm selling medicine to someone who is sick. They're buying this product to solve the problem. To link this back to an old interview technique, when the interviewer gives you something and then asks you to sell it back to them, This is the simplest way to do it. Work out what problem that thing solves, and then tell them they have that problem. If someone interviewing me for a sales position gives me a laptop and says, "Sell this to me," I'd ask them if I can send them an email instead, then remind them that to receive an email, they'll need this laptop. It's meeting a need. I'd create the problem of email and sell the solution of laptop. 2. To experience a lifestyle. Everything that doesn't fall under solving a problem instead falls under this category, to experience a lifestyle. This includes all the products that are not essential or are more expensive versions of things that already exist. If you're hungry, you can buy food. That's having a need met. But if you bought the most expensive food from the most expensive restaurant, that's experiencing a lifestyle. All purchases of this type are non-essential. You don't need them. You can either live without them or find a cheaper version that does the same thing. Luxury days out, brand name goods, entertainment, or media. Selling a lifestyle involves playing to a customer's desire to have more, to be someone, or something they personally value, whether that be social standing, the respect of others, or an enjoyed hobby. This is where salesmen are actually needed. Nothing sold in this area is important or essential, so you can't rely on the product to sell itself. You sell the lifestyle associated with the product. Take an advert for alcohol on TV. It usually shows a happy group of friends having a great time, or a bunch of sexy young people hanging out, or a bunch of good-looking people in suits at a fancy party. Then it'll show you the alcohol being involved with this lifestyle. Meaning through association, if you buy this alcohol, you'll have this lifestyle. To relate this to the laptop example earlier, if someone told me to sell them a laptop, I countered with how I'll send them an email so they'll need a laptop, and they replied with how they already have a computer. I'd then have to sell the type of lifestyle a laptop can provide. Freedom and mobility, a modern, sleek machine, the sexy image of a good-looking businessman walking through a glass-fronted building on their way to meet with someone important and powerful, laptop tucked neatly under their pressed suit. I know I'm not meeting a need anymore because it's already been met with their computer, so instead I have to sell a lifestyle. This is the same reason new tech products always sell out, despite not solving any new problems. It's a lifestyle. Those are the two rules of selling anything. It either solves a problem or allows you to experience a lifestyle. Now you know those, how does that tie into MMORPG microtransactions? Well, of those two sales reasons, the first one, meeting a need, is much more effective at selling large volumes of stuff. If you have a problem that needs a solution, and the solution is for sale, you don't even need salesmen to convince you or an advertising campaign to remind you. You just provide the product for sale, and it basically sells itself. The experiencing a lifestyle is much harder to sell. You need talented salespeople to convince the customer they need something and that you're the person to buy it off. Even then, there's a chance to fail, and then even if you do succeed, it's a constant uphill battle every day to keep convincing people of this. Real-world examples. How many adverts do you see every day for cars, or holidays, or premium TV shows, or alcohol? Absolutely loads, because these are lifestyles that require constant pushing, constant salesmanships. They are not essential. They are not solving a problem that cannot be solved for cheaper. In opposition, you don't see many adverts for bricks, or cement, or a non-electric toothbrush. Despite being involved in almost every aspect of our lives, these are all products that solve problems and so basically sell themselves. Any company or individual is buying these things because they need them, not because they want them. This means if you're in charge of an MMORPG and you want to sell something to the players, you don't want to focus on the non-essential luxury items, because these are hard to sell. and require more effort to sell. You instead want to focus on selling things that solve problems, which is the single biggest problem with microtransactions. In order to solve problems, the game makers must create problems to be solved. It works like this, and it's remarkably simple. Create a problem, sell the solution. Let's say you're playing a game, and in that game you have an inventory, a certain amount of space to carry items your character would need. If you have enough inventory space to comfortably manage for the whole game, there's no problem. No problem means no solution to sell, so the game designers can simply artificially make a problem. Reducing the size of the player's inventory is now the problem, and the solution, either a temporary or permanent increase in size, is now available for sale. It may only cost pennies to do this, but the cost isn't the main issue here. The issue is the game designer had total power to instantly solve this problem and make a good game. But instead, they allow an artificial problem, a weakness within the game's mechanics, to continue in order to sell the solution. The irritation to the player doesn't matter because it's now a revenue stream. The MMORPG genre is particularly vulnerable to this type of insidious monetization. As MMORPG players, we've invested a large amount of time and effort into our characters, and unfortunately, through a vile combination of the sunk cost fallacy, Skinner boxes, and familiarization, we'll continue to play long past an acceptable point. Those three things I just mentioned could be their own videos, but for now, let's just look at the reality of MMORPGs and the weaknesses they have to this method. Creating a problem and selling a solution requires finding a mechanic to make a problem from, and there are no shortage of gameplay mechanics in MMORPGs. The speed at which experience is gained to advance to the next level, the stats of our character, the stats of an NPC or enemies, the game world locations and access to those locations, the dungeons, the fashion, the inventory, mounts, teleports, player housing, healing items, even items to allow us to communicate across large in-game distances or to speak to the server. All these aspects can be monetized by making them into a problem and selling a solution. And if you think I'm just scaremongering, all the elements I just mentioned are things that have been monetized in various games. Now let's look at the other side of the argument and discuss some common phrases you may hear when discussing microtransactions. If you don't like them, just don't buy them. Okay, I totally agree. If you don't like them, don't buy them. That's fine. It's your money and you can indeed do what you want. But my issue was never with the buying or avoiding of them. My issue is, if a game is allowing a problem to exist simply to keep an income stream open by selling the solution, they've proved they have no problem in leaving problems in their game as long as they can monetize them. Processes like this always creep forward. They always advance and infect other areas and aspects. So, if a game is willing to charge me a small fee to access ample inventory space, how long until they're charging me to move quickly enough to make any progress, or reducing experience rates to virtually zero and then selling experience boosters? I don't mind you spending your own money on what you like, it's your money. But I do mind a game company purposely damaging their own game just to sell me the fix, because I know that attitude will lead to more problems with more sold solutions. But what if someone says to me, "You can earn all that by just playing the game"? This is actually a good comeback, but it can be broken down into two parts. Games where microtransactions affect gameplay, and ones where they do not affect gameplay. If the game is the first kind, where microtransactions do affect gameplay, it's still a huge problem. Here's why. If I could pay real-world money to purchase a premium currency, Or I could simply play the game for a while and earn the same currency. You'd assume it's a fair process. After all, you've still got the same chance to earn the currency, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, because it's technically true. You can get it. And no, because those systems are actually carefully maintained and never provide enough to actually be useful. There are two issues I have with games that allow me to earn premium currency by playing them. The first is how they've only put that ability in the game so they can loudly and proudly claim that it's there. They've not put it in to actually make it possible for free players to earn enough. They've put it in so they can claim a moral victory of being fair, despite the fact it's always impossible to earn enough at the rates they provide it. It's the token gesture of allowing effort to translate to in-game premium currency, despite the exchange rate of effort to currency being so abysmally low that unless you make playing the game your full-time job, you will never earn enough. The second issue is how any and all microtransactions that impact gameplay in relation to another player can impossibly damage the fun of other players. Yes, I could keep playing and eventually buy a better sword with the in-game currency I've earned, but the guy who spent £50 and bought it is now killing me repeatedly, and thus I'm not having any fun. If a microtransaction is essential to place me on a level playing field, it's not a lifestyle microtransaction. It's an intentional disadvantage that I need to pay to remove. Remember earlier how I said sales is either meeting a need or experiencing a lifestyle? Well, if I need to buy this thing to have any hope of enjoying the game, you've suddenly made it a need, which I understand is easier for you to sell, but sucks for anyone not willing or wanting or able to pay, because their needs won't be met and thus they won't have any fun. If you can earn the premium currency by playing the game, but you don't want to actually play the game because other players who paid more are constantly ruining the game for you, how are you supposed to earn it? Are you expected to keep playing a game you don't enjoy because economic unbalance has created a two-sided system, rich fun game against poor unfun game? It's an unfair system. Have you ever experienced a time in an MMORPG where you fought against another player who was effectively invincible because they'd spent real-world money? That is what this system creates. But what about the second type of microtransaction? The ones that don't affect gameplay and can be earned in-game? Well, they're actually okay. Here's why. I completely understand that games are made to make money. Even small indie developers want to make money, and so wanting to monetize your game is understandable. It's why the games as a service model is beginning to appear. I hate that too, but that's another video. Here we're focusing on microtransactions. If a microtransaction doesn't affect gameplay, such as a cosmetic override, or a nice player-owned house to relax in, or an extra character slot to try out more classes, I see it as completely fine, because those all fall into the second mode of selling something, selling a lifestyle. If the microtransaction is selling a lifestyle, it has no need to cause a problem. When selling a lifestyle, it's accepted that all needs have been met, all problems have been solved, and now money can be spent on luxury extras, like how after you've paid your rent and bought your food, you can buy a nice dinner or go and watch a film. This type of microtransaction doesn't need a problem to thrive. It needs to provide a service that players will look at and say, I want this. Guild Wars 2 does a great job of this, providing cosmetic overrides that look gorgeous and rely on lifestyle desires, not problems and solutions, to sell things. Microtransactions have also become dangerous in three other main ways. 1. They've now become standard. Whereas before a product was created, sold, and then left, microtransactions have turned the main product into a shop. Instead of finishing a game to a high level of quality with all the gameplay elements included, the industry standard has become finish the game to the level where it serves as an acceptable shop front, with enough gameplay mechanics to keep players around and enough problems to make the sold solutions possible. It's fundamentally changing the MMORPG from an adventure game to a reskinned online shopfront. You are no longer a player playing through a story and the world, you're a customer. You're the exact type of customer an unethical shop wants. A customer who's able to be constantly sold to and constantly reminded about what they could buy to solve their problems. Why do you think the shops in MMORPGs display themselves so prominently on screen? 2. They're not micro anymore. I don't want to name any specific games because they're all guilty, but some are far worse than others. One of my favourite MMORPGs sells access to a premium character race. This specific race is needed if you want to achieve the highest damage possible within the game, and the race is locked behind a microtransaction costing several £100. 100, a 3-digit number. That's not a microtransaction, that's several entire games. That's a month's rent. That's food for several people for several weeks. That's a ridiculous amount of money to quantify with the word micro. It's an insulting fact that they've created the problem of locking the best DPS in the game away and then sold the solution for a triple-digit figure. 3. And this is the one I personally hate the most, although it actually has the least impact on gameplay. They have broken game immersion. When I play a fantasy game, I expect fantasy. That's the style you're going for, so stick with it and make it work. When I see another player run past me dressed as a SWAT police riot officer, or driving a real modern-looking car around a medieval village, my immersion and sense of place is completely shattered. This applies more to cosmetic overrides, such as players making weapons look stupid, completely out-of-place things, but can also apply to in-game services. If I'm completing a dungeon with a group and your two-handed sword has been graphically overhauled to look like a giant melting ice cream, or your cape is a school backpack, I'm going to be suddenly reminded I'm playing a game, not living in a world. That's my personal reason for hating out-of-place cosmetic overrides, but I also dislike microtransactions that remove adventure or danger from the world, as that also breaks the immersion. I can think of one MMORPG that used to give your character a stacking injury debuff every time you set off a trap in a dungeon, meaning if you just ran through without being careful, you'd be placed at a huge disadvantage. It was great, as it meant the characters had to sneak ahead and clear paths slowly and carefully, just like old-school dungeon crawling or tabletop Dungeons and Dragons. But with a microtransaction buff, you could become immune to all the trap damage. This led to a situation where whoever had the buff just ran through all the traps, setting them all off, clearing the way, and making the game feel a little less real. I like immersion in my games, and while you may love your giant flaming motorcycle made of rainbows and your bobblehead potion and damage immunity paid buff, I just see them as immersion-breaking reminders that I'm playing an interactive shop simulator. To sum up, microtransactions ruin MMORPGs because the simplest way to make them sell is to create a problem within your own game and then sell a solution, which is the opposite of game design. It's game destruction. It's figuring out exactly how much fun you can remove from a game before players stop playing and then sell it back to them little by little. It's a horrific practice that will creep into more and more MMORPG games, turning them into virtual shop fronts that sell a fix for a problem they are causing, because that's more profitable than actually fixing the problem. And every game that claims you can earn the premium currency through regular gameplay is heavily monitored and reduces the rate at which you can earn so substantially that it may as well not even be there. It's a token gesture, an empty promise of it's possible while being insultingly unlikely. Add on to that how game designers and developers don't even listen to the word micro anymore. These are just full-priced exchanges within another game that have no reason to be there beyond greed. I know games companies won't care about any of this. It's all about the bottom lines. Microtransactions are here to stay because they're profitable. But I'm not a games company. I'm a gamer, and I dislike what they are becoming. As usual, thank you very much for watching. Now you know the 2 secrets to selling something. How does your favourite MMORPG handle microtransactions? Are they creating problems and selling solutions? Or are they selling a lifestyle? Do you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Please leave a comment below and I'll try to respond. If you'd like to chat live, I'm normally streaming nightly on Twitch, over at twitch.tv/Josh Strife Hayes. Thank you for your time and have a great day.